Welcome to the Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. Larry is the author of over 40 books, the founder of Dove International, a worldwide family of churches and ministries in 6 continents, and has over 50 years of leadership experience. He and his guests will share inspirational leadership insights from their journey with God. These insights, gleaned from serving leaders in many nations, will transform your life and leadership. For more information on Larry's books and resources, visit LarryKreider.com.
Larry Kreider here with the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast. Today, so excited to have Connie Dienner with me from Cavod. Welcome, Connie.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thank you, Larry.
Oh, you're very welcome. I know some of your leadership story. You have so much to offer so many people. And I love the way God uses women of God in our generation. And you're a prime example of that. You're from Cavod Performing Arts. What is Cavod? What does that mean? What is that? And then I'll ask you stories about your whole journey, okay?
Yes. So Cavod means the glory of God, his weighty presence, in Hebrew.
Wow.
And so I started Cavod 17 years ago this month, in August, actually.
17 years?
17 years. And so...
what does Cavod look like today?
Yeah, so we have classes in theater, dance, music and gymnastics. We have a theater that seats 200.
This is New Holland, Pennsylvania,
in New Holland,
right?
yes.
Because this, people all over the world are listening to this.
Yeah.
And so you're talking hundreds and hundreds of students come, right?
Well, we have around 700 enrollments.
Wow.
And so, pretty exciting. But it has been over the years that we've grown like this, just to see God move, but really to bring glory to God in the arts and with excellence is really my passion.
Well. So I've been to your theater many times and you do it so well. Let's go back to the early days. Okay. Let's first of all, before Cavod, let's go back. Did you have any idea when you were growing up you'd be doing something like this today?
I absolutely had no clue. No clue.
How it all started.
Okay, so I grew up in Indiana, on a very conservative Mennonite home, where I wasn't allowed to be involved in dance, music. Well, we did music, of course, without instruments.
Sure.
And so I grew up on a huge pig farm.
Of
1,000 pigs.
We have something in common. 1,000.
Yeah.
We never had that many pigs. Wow.
And so my dad was. I was the youngest of 4, so I was about 7 years old when my brothers got married. I was 6 or 7. I was in their weddings, and so as flower girl. And my sister is 8 years older than me, so I grew up almost as the only child. And so my dad used me as a hired hand on the farm, and I hated it with a passion because it was so not me. And he didn't really understand me because I would beat to a different drum compared to, So
what did that look like? How were you different?
I was just so creative and just very antsy and couldn't hold still and talked a lot, which did not, it was not what little girls should be doing.
In your culture, especially.
In my culture,
right?
You're supposed to be seen and not heard.
Right.
And he was a very strong German man. And, I had a lot of just suppressed a lot growing up. And so what I did as an outlet is I had all these chores after school. I had about an hour's worth of chores. And first of all, we were out in the middle of nowhere. My dad had moved down to southern Indiana to plant a church.
Okay.
So it was a small church out in the hills of nowhere. Wow. That we were planning a church and had most of the time about 25 or 30 people. And so I was very involved and used to being like the only youth, the only teenager. A few kids would come out, youth group. And
so you had leadership gifts you saw developing in you.
Yeah, so I led the youth group when I was when I turned 13 or 14, and I invited all the kids in the neighborhood, and we would go pick them up, and I would ride with my dad, and we would have maybe 10 or 15, but it took going through country dirt roads, picking them all up, and then I played games and led them to Jesus, and at a very young age. And
how old were you when you came to Christ?
I was in 7th grade.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I gave my heart to the Lord, although I didn't even know for sure what I was confessing because I just remember I've always said I'm sorry when I lied. I was very conscientious. Okay. Well, I always said, so what is this about? Because I probably really gave my heart younger, but really when I started because when you accepted Jesus in our culture back then is when you started wearing the covering and you put your hair up. And so I was like, oh my word, do I want to do this? Because I know what this means.
Sure.
Because I want to start wearing, looking different, no braids anymore. And so I made the commitment in 7th grade.
Okay, so you've made this commitment to Christ, and you're reaching out to some kids from the church and all that. But I've heard the story many times about how you've released your creativity with the pigs, right?
I did.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So after school, it was about an hour bus ride back from the country to the public school. I went to a public school. And so after school, I came home and I would have a good hour and a half's worth of chores. And I was just so bored, only person on. And it was a farrowing house that we called it. Back then it was pretty up to date, and they had automatic waters, where you would have to bring the sows, the mother pigs,
right.
And they would each have 20 pigs, 15 to 20. And
I
so,
get that. That's part of my background. It all makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So how did you release your creativity with the pigs?
Well, I would come out and they would just, when they would see me, they would perk up their ears and just make this big, loud just noise. They would just recognize me because I was going to feed them. Okay. And so in order to get them quiet, I started singing to them and dancing down the aisle of this farrowing house in my dress. And
the early days of Cavod.
The early days of Cavod, I guess. And so I just sang and sang, and I just cried out to Jesus and danced around it and was able to do that. That was okay, of course. And so that's where the pigs became dear to me, even though I had a little pig called Wilbur, and we ended up eating him, and it was fine with me. I mean, it was
goodness.
It was
you
just
ate Wilbur the pig.
We ate Wilbur, but it wasn't that close to me. But cleaned out the barn on Saturdays, and just really, had to. Sometimes my dad would keep me home from school to drive the tractor and to pick do the harvesting in the fall. He had 3 farms right there. My brothers lived in the farms with their kids. And so it was just a lonely place. I was so lonely.
Well, how did you get out of there? Obviously, sometimes something happened.
I don't know. I prayed a lot, and in high school, a lot of my creativity, my dad did allow me to do a vacation Bible school. So at 15, I led the whole vacation Bible school, and we would have 70 kids.
Wow. And
we would pick them up all over creation. I was able to drive by that time, and I drove my car and reached out to the neighborhood, and then I would do, little did I realize it was inside of me, but I did little skits at Vacation Bible School. And we had teachers that would come in and serve time, for the Mennonite network we were part of, would come from northern Indiana and be teachers, and I would oversee the whole thing. Okay. And then plus I did skits and things that people just where did you come up with that? And little did I know God was going to use that.
That was God-given creativity that you had way back then, preparing you for the day.
But the big release was when I was in high school. No, I was in 8th grade. Okay. I begged and begged my parents to allow me to be in a show. And because we weren't allowed to go to basketball games, we weren't allowed to be in.
Very conservative.
Yes, I was the only girl in a dress back in the 70s.
Wow.
And at school, and stood out, was very quiet and shy. I'm sure you could understand that now. But anyway, but I just was so conscious and very insecure. And so I begged and begged. And I think my parents were older. I think just to get me off their back, they finally said yes. And so I would stay after school for rehearsal. And I had this theater teacher, Mr. Trueblood, that pulled out everything inside of me. So I was allowed to be in shows, let my hair down, put makeup on, be in costume.
Wow.
And so he would give me different roles. Started in 8th grade, then in high school, I really became majorly involved, and I could drive and go back and forth. And then the kids in school started recognizing, who is that girl on stage? And I remember clearly hearing them throughout the auditorium saying, who is that? Who is that? And because we gave this assembly during the school day, and they said, Fisher. That was my maiden name.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, the next day, I would go to school and they would know who I was. And I was always very much in love with Jesus and would share my testimony and the goodness. And it just all of a sudden, I started to know who I was on stage, by the stage.
Wow.
And so my parents would come and see me and were very touched by what was happening. My dad became very open to it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then as I grew older, then, I graduated high school, went to Bible college, and Dave and I started dating.
Sure.
And eventually got married and moved to New Jersey at a young age. I was 19 when we got married. Yeah.
So you still carry this heart, this vision for the stage with you. And I think a leadership concept that really jumps out at me right now as I listen to you is that you found someone who can help you with it, Mr. Trueblood, you said?
Yes. And he wasn't a Christian.
Wow.
He still isn't today. I still keep, he just had open heart surgery and we're back. I think I'm just begging him to come in and visit sometime.
Yeah.
So he is just retired. He's in his late 70s. So he was a young teacher, full of energy and the most loved person in the whole school, but really saw past my dress and my Mennonite ways and pulled it out of me. And it changed my life forever.
Wow.
And
so you and Dave get married, and then what happened after that?
So I moved into Lancaster. I met him in Florida. That's probably another couple chapters. But we met in Florida, went to Bible college together, and in Rosedale, Ohio. Rosedale.
I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah. And then once we were married, we just said we were going to Hopewell. And this is a big church. We are not called to a big church. We are called to reach out. Our hearts both were to reach out. And Dave led worship and played guitar.
Sure.
And so we met up with a gentleman by the name of Dick Landis.
Sure, I know that. Sure.
Yeah, and so that's another story. It was just crazy how God leads. When we were praying, and it was right before we were married, getting married, we were dating and we were engaged. Our wedding was in 3 weeks, and we were just praying, God, where do you want us to go to church? We want to serve. We had such hearts for ministry, and all of our dating lives, we sang and played guitar. That's what we did for a date, because we weren't allowed to go to the movies.
Right.
That we didn't grow up that way. And so we would just pray and sing and worship and worship and play a couple games, but really worship the Lord. And he would come out to visit me and help me with Vacation Bible School. And we just always had a heart for ministry. And then I moved into Lancaster when we started really being serious.
Sure.
And
So you met Dick, and then talk to us about the next phase of your life then. Where did you end up?
Yeah. So after we had met Dick, we were praying, right before we're going to get married. Dave's like, I just remember this guy that I had met a few years ago, and his business card, I think, is in the back of my drawer. And he dug out his business card. It was Dick Landis, and he called him. Dick was in New Jersey. Okay. And he said, Dick's like, I was just praying. If you don't send me somebody, I'm done here. It was just his early days of planning a church.
Sure.
So he said, get back from your honeymoon and come down. And we went down the first Sunday after our honeymoon and drove back and forth from Lancaster to New Jersey every Sunday.
A few hours.
It's about an hour, about 2 hour drive.
2 hour drive, okay.
And so we would go back and forth every Sunday. This first Sunday after we were there, we had Sunday school material. Dave was leading worship the next Sunday. I mean, they had about 15 to 20 people there. And we helped them grow that church to a couple hundred people. Wow. And we were there for 17 years.
17 years?
17 years in New Jersey.
And that was in New Jersey.
And we led worship all of those years. Mm-hmm.
Are there any keys to leadership you look back now and you think, here's something I learned during that time you think would be helpful for somebody listening?
Yeah, I think just being confident in who you are.
Okay.
That was an issue that we both had coming from a background where just having this almost false humility.
Right.
Where you're always checking yourself and always trying to, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And just being confident, I think, would have been it was a huge issue for both of us.
Good.
But during that time then, I started directing shows. I had this passion. So once we moved down, I did their Christmas shows
This is church sponsored?
Church.
Okay.
Yeah, through the church. Mm-hmm. I did these Christmas shows every year, and they just got bigger and bigger. And then I would do, I had a mime team that I traveled with, and then Dave became youth pastor, and we had a huge youth group and an outreach there. And then we led worship, and we did Bible quizzing. I mean, we did it all. I think if I were to do it over again, I would probably be a little bit more selective.
Okay.
and do some more self-care. You know,
Sure.
when you have all this energy as a
That's right.
leader
That's right.
and you're starting a church and you see, oh, we could do this and oh, we could do that. And then if you're not careful, you become self-depleted and you don't spend the time in the Word that you should to
Sure.
where you really get your energy from.
Yeah, I often ask leaders, what is the thing that, as you look back, you wish you would have done different, or when you started? So that one thing you'd say would be self-care, taking care of yourself, making sure you're
Absolutely.
healthy.
I think that's going to be the
So true.
hardest thing.
Yes.
Still is.
Sure.
Because you have vision, especially if you're a visionary person.
Right.
And the minute you complete something else, if you're not careful, you can hardly be still because you're thinking of the next vision, which is your strength, but your weakness.
Right. So you eventually moved back.
So,
right?
yes.
And then Cavod started. So talk about how Cavod actually started.
Yeah, so we moved back just to get some
Back
rest.
to Pennsylvania.
Back to Pennsylvania. Things were a little shaky there, and we just felt like we were to pull away. We had been so involved.
Sure.
And we moved back to Pennsylvania thinking we would be here just for a couple of years.
Sure.
Dave and I went through a huge business loss at that point in time, and Dave's energy went through a deep depression, lost our house. There was just a lot that happened that just took us to a deep place of darkness in our own
So what
selves.
did you
And
learn
so
during that deep time, that dark time? When did you look back?
as I look back, God was with us. It felt like he wasn't. There was moments like, this is not what I signed up for.
Sure.
I was here for ministry and I'm here to serve people.
Right.
And we were very naive in a lot of ways, and yet God used us, and just being confident in those dark moments that he is with you, that he is working something in you, that will build into your future, even if it doesn't look like it, and I had a lot of self-doubt. So like, God, where are you? During those times when we started over with nothing and moving back here, we both had back issues. We were in bed at the same time for 6 weeks. My mom took care of us. It was just a crazy time. Worship center, we were going there and they paid our rent. It was a dark time.
That's a great church. Well,
yeah.
Wow,
and so then we just really just began to seek God and just started to see. Keith Yoder was very involved with us at that point. And
so he was a mentor that
mentor
helped you through those seasons.
Sure.
He's been a mentor to so many people.
Yeah. And so out of that darkness then and weakness, as we started just trusting God in we had nothing. We're starting completely over, ministry-wise too. And we're like, God, where do you want us? We love the East. We were going to go back to Connecticut. We love the way that the people in New Jersey are first-generation Christians. There were so many people came to know Jesus, Italian people. We love that culture. And something about getting out of Lancaster really helped us.
That helped Laverne and I too. We moved to South Carolina. We were young and helped us. What do you say to someone listening right now? They're going through a really dark time, and they had this vision from God, and things didn't quite turn out the way they thought. As you look back in this dark time in your life, what do you say to them? I
really feel like just cling to the Word, find scriptures, know that His Word never fails, and really just find those moments with the Lord. And I think what the enemy tries to do is make you feel like there's no hope.
Right.
Like you don't have hope, that there's no way this is ever going to change. I'm not good enough. What happened? What did I do wrong? Where, you just blame yourself and go into a lot of shame. And I think I would just really cling to the Word and know who I am. I think if I would have had more of the Word inside of me and done a little more self-care, that I would have not gone into such deep darkness.
Yeah, you keep using that term self-care. Do you want to expound on that a little more?
Yeah, what I mean by self-care is just giving yourself time to have fun, to date your husband, to lay ministry aside. Don't let it be your identity. When ministry becomes your identity, then you get lost in that.
That's true.
And then you lose your focus on Jesus, which is the very reason that you're doing all of this.
Exactly. It's so good. So good.
And that
And all things still do work together for good.
They
to those
do.
Who love God. Isn't that true?
They do.
But it's hard to see that sometimes during the dark times. Now let's go back to when this vision, you learned all these things, these truths through your whole journey. It was an amazing journey that God's given you and Dave. Now let's talk a bit about how the whole Cavod vision even
Yeah.
started? I want to hear that.
Yeah, so we were, after we started getting some healing and trusting God, that's another chapter, story of how we were led to a ministry there right on the Welsh Mountain. And we're there for 10 years. And God really used that ministry. We had a huge youth group there.
Sure.
And the beginning days there, we just served and served and served and loved kids. And kids have always, mentoring has been huge on both Dave and I's heart. We just love discipleship.
Being spiritual fathers and mothers,
Yeah.
you do that so well. You both do that so well.
And so when we were there, I can think about 9 years or so, Dave actually became associate pastor there. And I had done shows. I started doing shows, and this time they were bigger and
Was this
huge.
Cavod shows?
No,
yet, or
this
just
is through the
shows?
church, and we rented out the Host in Lancaster.
Wow.
And had like 800 people there, sold out shows, did Joseph. We wrote the story of David and did it at Lancaster Mennonite High School, Fine Arts Center. And
This is all before Cavod.
This is all before Cavod.
I didn't know all this. This is amazing.
And so during that time, though, there was a lot of pressure just to be bigger and do things like Sight and Sound. And I love Sight and Sound. They're my friends. But that's not my vision. My vision is to disciple. And so I would do these shows, and about 6 months later, then the kids would be gone, or the young adults would be gone. And I'd have to start over. And I'm like, this is not what I want. And so I just laid it all down. The Lord, through a series of things, I'm like, I'm just done with the arts. And I cried over it. And I said, I'm just going to go be the best PTO mom. And I'm going to serve in the public school where my kids were. And I was done with ministry. I was just not the church. I wasn't bitter towards the church, but I was done with the arts. I said, okay, I am just done. And I laid it all down. And one Sunday morning in January, I was sitting in church, and the minister there got up and had a word for me. And he said, Connie, the Lord doesn't really care how you feel. And I can quote it. I still have it recorded.
Right.
He doesn't really care how you feel right now, but he has a plan for you in the arts.
Wow.
And it's a plan for you to start an academy of arts. That first, the dance must go first, and then it's music, and then it's theater. And God will use it throughout the world for its excellence. Wow. And you will be, and Cavod, at that point, he said, and the academy will be known. It was called Cavod Academy of the Arts. So we started off with calling it Capital Academy because it was associated with the church.
Sure.
And he said, it will be known as Capital Academy of the Arts. It will be known throughout the world for its excellence. And so take it and run with it. And I literally went limp, and I just cried and cried and cried. I was just, sometimes words, most of the time when you get a word, it hits in your spirit. Like that it's a confirmation. Well, it was a confirmation of the arts, but I'd never even thought of starting a school. So this was January. I began to pray on this, and 2 or 3 months later, at that time, like I said, Dave was associate pastor, got up, and the elders got up and said, we're going to have an auction, and we are going to raise money, about $11,000 to open this. I had felt like we were supposed to do this by the school year. It happened quickly. Sometimes words you put on the shelf and you trust God. Just don't ever let them go dormant, though. Keep, speaking over them and keep them fresh in your mind. But this one was like, oh my goodness, what am I to do with this? I couldn't lay it down. And so Dave, there was a little barn on the property at that time. And so Dave priced out how much it would be, about $11,000 to remodel this barn to make it look excellent. And so that one Sunday morning where there was an auction, and somebody, you give $500, who wants to give $1,000, who wants to give $200, and we raised $11,000 that Sunday morning. And we opened up in August then. What would that be? I'm really bad with dates. 17 years ago. Yeah, 2000 something.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of Cavod as we know it today.
Yeah.
Now, talk about your journey from then to now. What has happened? What's transpired? And today, what's it look like today then?
Yeah. So we went from 25 enrollments at that time.
Sure.
And then 2 years later, we moved into this was out in the Cowpatch country. And so I think we had 35 or 40 enrollments in 2 years. My first open house, nobody came. I
Really?
had food and everything.
Nobody came.
No one came, but it was out in the hills. If anybody
Sure.
knows Gap, out in the Welsh
Yeah,
Mountain.
Sure, I know where you're at.
And so we started getting the word out through the Penny Saver, and that was huge.
So what
And-
do you say to somebody that starts something like that and nobody shows up? What do you say to them? Because you obviously didn't quit.
Yeah, go back to what the Lord told you.
Okay.
If I didn't have, you just have a strong word. I mean, I had a word like that took me out of nowhere, that I knew this was not my
Sure.
idea. And I told the Lord many times when I got in a deep spot, God, this was not my idea. This is not cool right now, because
Right.
I'm not doing this for me. And so throughout the years, I would go through really just, every level, and hiring teachers, and really developing the vision, and,
Yes.
wanting it to be excellent. And Tanya, our daughter, who's 40 now, she had just gotten married and helped me start the school. And so she took all of her classes really in a difficult place throughout her years, because she loved to dance. It wasn't, of course, I was thrilled because I never got that opportunity, but she just had this passion inside of her. And so I would pull her in and out of school. She would be like 4 years old, and
Right.
I would go to the recital, and I would be like, oh my goodness, she can't wear those costumes. That music is horrible. And I would pull her out, and she would beg me, I love Jesus, Mommy. I'm going to be fine. Then I would put her in at 7. Then I would take her out, and I would put her in at 10.
Sure.
And by the time we moved over here and she was in 7th grade, I knew she had a firm foundation. But it is, in the world, the arts are it's really hard.
Right.
And you can lose your kids easily,
Yeah.
because they can get involved in that secular way of thinking. And
Let's
so
talk about that. What's different about Cavod and how you see the
Yeah.
arts, and going to a secular studio? What's the difference?
Right. So we are really promoting changing the culture of the arts. And you can be a Christian and do the arts. That's great. I've met a lot of different people over the years who have studios that love God and do a dance.
Sure.
But we change it around where we love the Lord through the dance. And so it has to be part of the culture. And so at Cavod, the culture is loving, it's warm, it's about our ministry first and then dance. The dance classes look the same. We don't spend a half hour, preaching. We don't have Bible verses up everywhere, but all of our teachers are passionate about Jesus.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they're also very excellent. And they've come from Connecticut, from Georgia. God has just brought people from all over to teach with his passion, and they hear about it. And that was part of another prophetic word that I got from Bethel a few years ago, that people would come from all over the U.S. to choreograph and to teach, because
Wow.
they didn't even know what I was doing really, but would teach because of the anointing and the power of God. And that's the Cavod weighty presence in his glory. And so like at Cavod now, our front desk lady, if she hears our manager, if she hears something, a news about someone that's going through a hard time, she stops and prays for them. We bring it to our leadership team, we pray. But just the difference is we create with purpose. That is our vision.
Create with purpose.
We create with purpose. It has to have purpose behind the
So
create. Yeah.
And you
activity.
have taken teams throughout the world, right?
Yeah, every year in the summer.
And what are some of the places you've gone?
We've been to Aruba, which was really a hard missions trip. No, I'm kidding. And we've done 200 kids there. We do arts camps.
Wow.
Throughout every year I've taken, except through COVID here, but almost
Sure.
every single year for the last 10 years, I've taken international trips.
What were some nations
So
you've gone to?
we've gone,
Just give some examples.
Puerto Rico is,
Sure.
U.S., but Puerto Rico, Aruba. We've been to South Africa, Cape Town,
remember
our
that.
friends there for 3 times. We were in Brazil now twice, Switzerland we've been to, and just doing an arts camp. And we have many invitations to go. I think I could go all summer long.
I'm sure.
And I would love that. But that is a dream. And that's what the Lord told me years ago, that you would have 10 teams that would go out throughout the nations in the summer. And now we're seeing at least 1, if not 2, this coming summer. So
that will still happen. So talk about today. What does Cavod look like today? You have a couple locations locally. You said you've got hundreds of students. So what does it look like today? And then we'll talk about the leadership principles you've learned.
Sure. Today it would look like our classes start at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and go till about 9 o'clock.
Okay.
4 nights a week. We offer in New Holland over 120 classes a week. And then we just opened up Mannheim, and we have one studio there. And so the Lord had told me years ago in this whole thing, when I was just at my bottom, wit's end with what do I do? Where do I go? There was one point in time in ministry, which would have been about 5 years into it, that I was 9 months behind in rent and almost quit. And I just had a landlord that really believed in us and worked with us. But I was going to stop and go to Walmart and get a job and pay off the lease. And he said no. So through that hard time, the Lord said, well, you will not only grow, but you will start micro campuses throughout the U.S. And I'm like, wow. Lord, I can't pay my rent. What are you talking about? And was it me? Is it God? I mean, some of the crazy things he has told me over the years, I'm starting to almost now, like 17 years, starting to believe maybe this could happen.
Sure.
And so we got this opportunity to open up in Mannheim, and we have 18 classes there. And that's really the vision, is to have micro campuses that would connect to local churches. I'm big on partnership. I can't do this alone.
You do it so well.
And you just have to partner. You have to be in accountability. If you don't have accountability, you're out there, and you don't have the covering.
Exactly.
And so just being able to now do Mannheim, and our local church in New Holland is very much instrumental in helping us with
Speaking of local church in New Holland, and while you're doing all this, you and Dave also, for a season, were pastoring a church, right?
We did.
At the same time, and now obviously you're more spiritual parents to the leaders today. Talk about that.
That was crazy.
How did that work?
That's crazy. But we felt 12. It was 13 years ago in December. When the ministry we were part of really went through a really trying time, and Dave and I were left with a remnant. And we felt that we were to take this, it was like 225 people went down to 30, and that we thought we are to take these precious people. We didn't want to just let them go.
Sure.
Because
your pastor's heart.
Yeah, and so we decided just to worship, and we had some great mentors at that time that walked us through that. Yeah. And we just worshiped and trust God. It was a hard time, but we just worshiped, and these people, then it began to grow, and we're like, okay, what do we do? We were never, in our point of view, called to be a senior leader, a senior pastor.
You did it out of necessity and need, and God honored you. And
so it was probably so rewarding, and we saw many people healed from just a bad taste in their minds of church, and had many prophetic words that we would be a hospital. Yeah. And it was about, I don't know, Larry, it's been 6 years now we've been with Dove, and that was just the best thing that ever happened to us. We didn't know what to do with these people. We never led a church. We always assisted, and love walking beside a visionary leader. Right. In the meantime, we saw this other vision of Cavod growing and growing and growing and taking over more of my time.
So, but you were able to, by the grace of God, find younger leaders, train younger leaders today. Such a healthy church. And you and Dave are like the spiritual moms and dads behind the scenes, not leading. We now have other leaders who are doing a fantastic job. And I think the leadership concept principle is that you really find there's this place of convergence where we kind of try different things. We find who we really are and what we're called to do and be. And you are spiritual moms and dads, and that's worked, and you're a visionary leader, obviously, and you worked so well as a couple in this, and others with you for Cavod. So if somebody wants to get involved in Cavod today, how do they do that? Because we're going to make sure on the show notes, if anybody wants to get involved in Cavod, the show notes will be there. They can get a hold of you, get a hold of your ministry. We'll talk about that. Yeah, Cavod.org. You can go as our website. Okay. And so phone numbers are there for our office. You can email. You can reach out to me, Connie at Cavod.org. If you want to be on I do this Coffee with Connie email
every other week has been a really big hit,
Right.
where I just kind of share my heart about what's happening in the ministry personally.
Awesome.
So you can be a part of that. There's a place on the website to sign up for our email address as well.
So what are some of the ways people could connect with Cavod? Like if they have children who want to be trained, for example, talk to us about that. What are some
Yeah,
ways?
so you can go online. All of our schedule is online, or you can call in 717-354-3355 is our phone number.
Sure.
But our whole schedule, everything is very automated. You can sign up for classes right there online. You can call in the office. The girls at the office would love to help you, or email me as well. But we have classes. You have to be potty trained up to age 75. So we have from all different perspectives. Like, Larry, you could take a hip hop class, actually.
Wow, wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. Laverne would love that.
Yeah, I
sure.
bet. Yeah.
I'm sure. So, any other leaders, as you look back after all these years now, and 17 years with Cavod, it's well known all over this region now. You've been all over the world. You've had church leadership, and of course, we've been privileged to work with you in that and in the Cavod International family. Any other leadership, if you're sitting here with some younger leaders or people inspiring to leadership, or maybe going through a hard time, any other things you would say to them, things that they should know, preparing them for leadership for the future?
Yes, I think two things I would say. Number one is be in the Word and embrace the Word.
Good.
You've got to embrace and just believe God for what His promises are. Number two, I would say, be accountable and have a mentor. That's one thing that Dave and I both did all the years. Mentors have saved us so much grief. Yeah, sometimes you don't always love what they say, but as a young person, you kind of think you can do it and you got all this energy, but learn from the older people or your mentor. You just have to be accountable, and don't be afraid to share your heart with your mentor or with somebody, because we all have stuff, It's just been a year ago, I started going to a counselor. I mean, that sounds crazy, but
That's fantastic, I think.
I didn't even realize, so many times you can tell other people and you can minister and you see people set free, and the same time you're going through something yourself as a pastor, as a leader, and you almost feel guilty. Well, I can pray and other people can get set free. Why can't I?
Right.
And sometimes you just need someone else.
So true.
And so don't be afraid to share your heart. More than likely, the person that's mentoring you will have been through it before too. And I just know that whatever you're going through, that you're human and it's okay. Exactly. God uses, what do we say in Dove, right? Ordinary people to do extraordinary things.
Exactly right.
And so don't ever doubt, I don't have enough, I just can't do it. I don't have any training in the arts. I had no clue what I was doing.
Amazing.
And still don't, but just trusting God. Yeah. I think my favorite verse, first of all, my life verse is Micah 6:8, is just to do justly and to love mercy and to walk. What does the Lord require of you? To do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And I just marrying the two is to have, justice, which is really my personality, but I have to have mercy as well and love.
You do that well.
And then verse 6 in Philippians 1, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. He's done it, and it's going to be okay. Just say to yourself, if you're going through a hard time, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Either here, I'm going to go be with Jesus. So, one or the other, it's a win-win situation.
It really is. God began the good work in each of our lives, and He will bring it to completion.
That's right.
So, Cavod Performing Arts, Cavod Theater, Connie Dienner, this has been wonderful. Thank you. These insights are going to help so many people around the world. Any last words of wisdom you have before we close today?
Larry, just thank you so much. Dove is amazing. It's an amazing family, and any of our Dove family out there, just love you guys and love to connect. That we need one another.
We do.
We just have to lock arms. And in this day and age, as you see things in the world that are difficult, just have fun. Pray for people, but don't lose your joy. Right. Jesus is coming back.
Yeah, His joy is our strength.
That's right. That's right.
Tries to rob us of our joy.
He does. Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. Connie, thank you again for joining us today for the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast, and where we learn these small changes we can make that can make a massive difference in our lives. And again, check out the show notes, get more about Connie, more about Cavod, This ministry, your ministry has just started, Connie. There's so much God's going to do you haven't even dreamt or thought about yet.
Yes.
So I believe that with all my heart. So thanks to all of you. Again, check out the show notes and join us again as week after week we meet with key leaders from throughout the nations of the world and who have seen God do amazing things in their lives and leadership, and we can learn together what God would have us do for the future.
Thank you.
So, God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Connie.
Yes.
And God bless all of you, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you for listening to Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. If you want more information about any of Larry's books, daily devotionals, small group resources, or any other teachings, go to larrykreider.com.